Hey y'all, Zelda here. It is so nice to be back with you in 2023, a new year. It is amazing that some of you have been doing the weekly readings with me for a while now. I really appreciate all of you, and I appreciate you all being so encouraging and understanding with taking some time for some hibernation, some recharge for the new year. I am still deciding what the kind of updates might be to the weekly format, but this week I wanted to come to you not with a pick a pile reading, but actually just with a channeled message from a few of my guides who deal with this liminal threshold experience that we are going to be in as we have this transition from 2022 to 2023. There are many times and points in the year where different cultures and traditions celebrate their new year. The astrological new year, for instance, is actually in the beginning of the zodiacal wheel, which is with Aries at the spring equinox. And so this past kind of threshold is not necessarily the new year, but it is an annual marker that we, switch and reset our calendars. There also are, a couple different planets that are retrograde right now that have that kind of energy of reflecting, of gathering resources. I think a lot of times, we're in Capricorn season now, and it feels like this New Year time does really feel like a time to kind of set goals and gather resources and refocus, recenter, recollect, and to move towards the things that our heart and our soul is calling for. So this feels like a beautiful time to be, planting seeds and appreciating the kind of harvest from the past year and taking that in. So I do want to take a moment to tune in. I wanted to introduce you first, since it's not going to be a pick a pile, but you can kind of see if there's one of these guides that you resonate with and see if you notice any messages. As always, I really encourage you to have a sense of your own autonomy and your own guiding voice in this process, your own intuition building. Only you can know what messages are meant for you and which are not. So I always encourage you to feel into what feels true and right in your body in this moment, and check in with your own guides. So the guides that we're going to be pulling some cards and tuning in with today, who have expressed some of this wisdom in the past and some interest in participating in this video. One of those is Faxion. Faxion is carved by Leandro de Souza. Has a lot of wisdom around walking and moving between the seen and the unseen, between this realm, this dimension, and others, between portals, thresholds, transitions. He is one of my master skulls and one of the closest guides that I work with. Another guide that we're going to be working with, this is Achtung. Achtung is a guide that works with attention, and the skull that Achtung chose has an anhydro in it, which is a pocket of ancient water. And there is this quality of finding the nectar of ancient wisdom and harnessing some of that through practices that foster attention. And so this felt like the attention and intention felt like Achtung wanted to bring that wisdom in. And then finally we have Octavia. I have to kind of move my face out of the frame. Octavia is a being that moves between worlds and builds and composts worlds in this kind of like ongoing infinite dance. So Faxion, Octavia, and Achtung are the three beings that we're going to be working with. As I do with the pick a pile readings, I did let them kind of guide the choice for the decks. I'm not sure how many cards. I think I'm just gonna kind of tune in, see if they have any messages from each being, and maybe pick, you know, a card or two for each one. And that's kind of gonna be the format for today. I just wanted to kind of offer some, you know, nuggets as we're in this transitional time, and some ways to kind of be reflecting forward and being in our process of becoming. The three different decks are going to be the Numinous Tarot deck. This is the tarot deck we're going to be using, the Prairie Majesty Oracle deck, and the Reclaim Oracle deck. And all three of these are decks that I like backed on Kickstarter. All three of them are decks that I really love. I'll have the information in the description box for you. So if you would like to tune in, I have already centered, lit a candle, spent some time in meditation with these beings. I am going to just call in guides right now. If you'd like, you can skip ahead, or you can spend a moment centering. I definitely encourage you to have whatever process allows you to gather and center your energy and your intention in this moment. I call upon my own guides, ancestors, teams, and lineages in this and every lifetime, the wisdom of my past, present, and future selves. I open myself to be receptive to messages from Spirit, and I call upon, in gratitude, Faxion, Octavia, and Achtung to join in this space and share their infinite wisdom. I also call upon the guides, ancestors, teams, and lineages of each and every person watching this video so that they may be guided and utilize their sacred power of discernment to know which messages are meant for them and which they may leave behind. Okay. So, in this time, a big image that I've been seeing is this kind of like reaching forward and like grasping the hand of the future self, and this releasing and letting go, or like dissolving of the past, and that this is this like ongoing process of kind of like evolution and becoming that is all a part of being in relationship with the world. I am going to pull some cards just to see what messages they have to share with us for this time. I think I'm going to start by pulling one from each, and then we'll see what kind of clarifying, what kind of additional things might be supportive. So the tarot card that I pulled was the Founder. And the Founder is in the Numinous Tarot deck, the card for the Emperor. And this feels very, it feels like a very structural, integritous type of approach to the kind of like hibernation. It's like, it's winter, it's maybe chilly, depending on where you're watching this, right? In the Northern Hemisphere, it's cold, things are asleep, right? But it is this kind of new year energy. And this feels like the fours feel like they create this like constructive container. And the Emperor, the Founder, if we think of like the Founder, the word that comes to mind that I hear is like a foundation, right? This like sturdy structural foundation. And that there's some invitation to be able to stabilize yourself and build like almost like the four corners or something, like having these pillars that you can actually build on top of. And so maybe this is like habits that you're building that are like daily habits, or maybe it's things that you know are ways that you resource yourself, ways that you manage your resources. This also feels like practical in some ways, like I'm feeling that kind of like Capricornian energy, and it feels very like self-establishing. It is a card that is actually ruled by Aries and by the establishing of the self, and it like that's kind of Aries. Aries is the new beginnings, or the first part of the new cycle in the zodiacal calendar. And so with the Founder, it actually feels like it really supports this newness, this establishment of new systems that can actually hold who you are becoming and allow, space for everything that is necessary. The second card that feels like all three of these cards feel like things to consider in this threshold almost. Liberate. I get curious about like the Founder. How is the Founder creating? How are you founding a liberatory system for yourself to exist in? Because it is true that there are many systems that we cannot control, that we exist inside of. I know that there are metaphysical lenses that we could utilize around the creation of reality, but I do think it's important to note that in our three-dimensional experience that we interface with on a daily basis, there are systems of oppression in effect all of the time. However, we also get to participate and internalize and reify those systems within ourselves based on how we set up our schedule in our day. That's one system. Our system for self-care, our system for how we eat our meals, right? Like all of these systems, like how do we grocery shop, right? Like those can be systems, how we organize. All of these are kind of functional systems. And if that doesn't feel like a good term for you, totally okay. But this idea of like what reminds me that I'm free feels like this foundational, like the Founder having this founding principle, right? Of liberatory freedom as a basis for how we exist in the world. And so as we kind of, this feels like maybe it's setting goals in a very practical way, or maybe it's setting long-term dreaming, right? Maybe it's just a tiny change that you're developing, right? A question that you're asking yourself, a way that you're holding this time perhaps as an opportunity not to beat yourself up or set new goals, but actually to dream up new possibilities of what is possible in your life and what feels exciting to you. What reminds you that you're free? I also think of this I'm just kind of noting this quality of feeling. I had a conversation with someone, a friend of mine, and we were talking about core desired feelings and Daniel Laporte's work and how it is pretty revolutionary in a way internally, right? An internal revolution to envision how we want to feel and to arrange our life around that, to allow our life to be a place where the life that we want to live can blossom and flourish. Feels constructive. And I see this kind of opening. Faxion is always showing this image, right, of like realizing that something is possible by seeing ourselves in the world around us. And Achtung and Faxion and Octavia, one of the things that they wanted to show is this idea that actually everything is possible, right? Believe in magic, believe in world creation, believe it, right? And put your attention towards it if you want it to exist. This isn't about like being right or wrong. It's about like creating and dreaming up the world and then finding the ways to anchor that into reality. The third card came as a reversal, which feels actually very relevant, I guess, especially in my mind in relation to these cards. And this card is arrogance. And upside down, it's kind of like balanced, right? Balanced, and I also see a 4, which is the number of the founder. The founder is 4 for the emperor. But there's also like a square angle in this. And so that does feel also like symbolic in a way. I'm just refinding the thread of where I was or where we were. So Faxion says that arrogance is a function of the ego bolstering itself by amputating a part of oneself to use as a stepping stone. By like the image, right, is like if these were all one being, like all one ball of clay, and then a piece of it was pulled off and used as a stepping stone, that this is arrogance, right? The idea that like we are separate and I am better, right? And that medicine or a function of like subverting arrogance is that part of how we realize the potential in the world all around us, the magic, the actionable miracles that are in the world all around us. We, in order to do that, part of that is realizing that it is an extension of ourself. And in that way, we can have influence over it. And that we are also a very limited, small expression of all that we are. The I that is me is a small relative expression of all that we are. And so in subverting arrogance, there's this like reabsorption. This is shadow work. This is a refusal to other, right? To compost those parts, to forgive and love and have compassion. This is a great contrast too with the founder, because the founder's not I'm going to merge with everything and I'm going to be just fully submissive or surrendered to the world. The founder is actually like very systematic, very structural, very intentional, very willful. But that same devotion or that same commitment applied to this kind of revolutionary freedom of being interconnected and being expanded, not being trapped in the smallness that our egos, likes, and dislikes are. This is a liberatory practice internally, but also externally, because there are many external systems of oppression that can only function with the idea that some people are better or more deserving than others. Without that idea, systems of oppression, many of them are dismantled, because it's like the Dr. Seuss, that's the image that they're showing me, is that Dr. Seuss book of like the Sneetches with the stars on their bellies. And some Sneetches have stars on their bellies, some don't. And they, have a star belly making machine that comes into town, like a grifter basically. And they go back and forth so many times, getting them removed and then saying it's better. It's like very trendy. And then eventually the Sneetches have gone back and forth so many times that they can't tell which of them were originally star-bellied and which ones weren't. And then the system kind of falls apart, right? The illusion that one is better than the other falls apart and is dismantled. And then the system can't sustain itself anymore. And in this situation, very much like in the world that we live in, actually, of capitalism, once there is no more capital to be gained by this discrepancy, that system also falls apart. Now, that's a very large image. In our own lives, it can be very different. But actually, liberatory practices are very important on a personal level, as well as on a larger scale. And so this also feels like when we have that relationship of seeing the impact and the relevance of the micro and the macro, and how they're in this dance together, that those two things, one ceases to be more important than the other. They are in relationship. This also feels like a good time to name that in the span of this year, we are also crossing this threshold from the Lover's Year, 2022, to the Chariot, 2023. And the Chariot feels like a graduation. It's the end of the first line, and the first line is all about the development of the I and the development of the self in these 3-lined methods that were developed. I learned about them through Lindsay Mack, but Lindsay Mack teaches based on other lineages of someone else who also developed this way of breaking the tarot, the major arcana, into 3 lines. And this feels like it's a graduation at the end of the line of the ego development that is actually very relevant, right? This personal healing work. But then actually there is transformation, right? There is a bit of triumphance to the Chariot, but it's kind of a fragile triumphance, or an ephemeral triumphance, perhaps, is better of a word than fragile, because it's more like fleeting, right? It's just not sustainable, but it is exciting in some way, or celebratory. There are successes, and there are maybe relative realization of the work that is yet to be done. but we need those celebrations, and moving from this like deeply relational into the ego feels very much like that, like releasing, and we've taken back into ourself the things that we had othered, and maybe now need to do some liberation work with that. I'm gonna pull one more card from each of these in terms of maybe like some envisioning stepping forward. Okay. So with this, I'm holding, like, this felt like naming kind of like where we're at. And this feels very much like, where are we going? Maybe that will evolve a little bit. So, the Two of Bells. This feels like a cautioning or an invitation to realize that these stories we tell ourselves are powerful. The things that we say to ourselves, the narratives that we hold, the beliefs that we continually repeat to ourselves, they are powerful, and they can limit us. And by contrast, they can also liberate us, right? But in here, this feels like, be careful of like those stories that just feel like they're not open to questions, not open to curiosity, not open to flexibility of any kind. Things that are too rigid can become brittle and liable to break. The Two of Bells is the Two of Swords in other decks, and there's just this like explosion in the head of energy, and this explosion that feels very much like a sublimation, right? A turning into from a solid to a gas. And that this quality of dissolution of these narratives is like drawing down the energy into the heart, into making decisions in an embodied, in a spirit guided, in a like higher self type of way. When I say higher self, I actually mean like that could be taken spiritually, but I also mean this in like a psychological context of like DBT or mindfulness, of like using wise mind or like higher self to like allow some sort of like ego combative or ego checking system. So the Two of Swords oftentimes feels like encouraging in a like decision-making process. Like when you're deciding between two options, to me, this feels like it's okay to choose between those, but there are more than two options. Allow yourself to not get trapped into a system by believing that what you have in front of you is all that exists, or that the things that you're kind of choosing between are like this maze that you're stuck in. We can envision more options, more ways. We have to be curious. We have to be open to inspiration. We have to be open to influence. We have to seek out guidance. We have to clear our mind and meditate. We have to be patient, right? Like there are all these things that can influence being able to approach things with a little bit more wonder. And so that feels like the invitation of the Two of Cups. I mean, the Two of Bells, which is the Two of Swords. They're also sitting at a threshold, usually in this card, like water and earth. And so I think that also feels very relevant to like having this stable foundation, the founder founding that foundation, to be able to do this process on top of. The second one is dig. What do I want to carve out space for in my life? This feels really in line, right? Like what these liberatory systems. How is your daily life? How is like the way that you structure your day, your morning routine, your evening routine, how is your job, right? Like your lunch break, like these practical things, how you move your body, how you rest your body, how you challenge your body. All of these different things, like getting curious about like, how do you want to feel and how can you implement systems or space in your life that create the feeling that you would like to feel, that cultivate holy emotions in your heart. This is something from Gigi Rose that I really love, is this idea of cultivating holy emotions in my life, and how I carve out space in my life can sometimes be indicative of whether or not I have the capacity to hold those holy emotions and sit with spirit in my heart. And the final part of this really feels like it's another reversal. And it is criticism. And sometimes this feels like a specific message, but maybe it's for you and maybe it isn't. And part of it, maybe I also need to hear it. But there's this aspect of criticism in that criticality and allowing yourself to see clearly in a like cutting through the BS kind of way is fundamental for being able to change things. We need to be able to see and be honest with ourselves and not have so much shame that we're not capable of doing that process. However, we are not obligated to receive criticism from anybody at any time. We get to evaluate and be open to criticism that is constructive and loving and compassionate, that holds our humanity intact. And this feels fundamental, right? Because this feels like being free. We need to be free to offer consent to criticism or to put up boundaries, right? Whether that's blocking someone online or not accepting a message or saying, no, I can't talk about this right now. Or saying, no, I'm not open to feedback at this time, right? And there's exceptions to these things. Like I said, that's why I started with like criticality is important. And in order for criticism to be constructive, people have to be constructing something. They have to be investing and constructing in something. And first of all, not everyone owes you constructive criticism, but not everyone is interested in constructing anything. Sometimes people are being hurtful and framing it, or being critical and framing it as constructive, and it just isn't, right? And so this feels like, how are you aware of like turning criticism on its head to say that like in a world where we are in a relationship where there is a transformative like alchemy happening, a shedding and a like building up and an evolving, right? An evolution. How is there an acknowledgement that that we get to honor each part, each segment, each section of that process, that by not shaming, by not valuing one over the other, by not saying I'm better because I've arrived here and they're still working on that, that this allows us to also kind of like work on that part of ourself too. It allows us to have boundaries, and it allows us to feel free to carve out space for loving, supportive things that do make us feel free. Part of the thread of that kind of left in terms of like, I think I said the important part, and that's why I just kind of like wrapped that up. I'm just going to see if there's any other pieces of wisdom. This feels like a really important time of intentionality and allowing space for you to become more and more of who you are. I hope that these retrogrades are offering you a lot of courage and opportunity to revisit things that need to be completed or re-examined, to get in touch with inner parts of yourself that have been needing some attention and some love. I hope that you're being kind to yourself and to each other. I am very grateful if you have some feedback on what kind of videos you'd like to see. At this point, my plan is to try and do one video a week of any kind. Some of them might be pick a card videos. Some of them might be general kind of channeling from one of my master skulls or some of my guides. And then I have some other ideas as well in terms of like intuition building things. But if you have a request, feel free. You can send me a message, you can comment it, you can message me on Instagram. I would love to hear. I'm excited to be kind of compiling an ongoing thing so that I can feel excited and inspired to make videos for you each week. I'm very grateful and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.